and welcome to Execute Chapter 66, a Star Wars fiction podcast where we discuss canon, legends, and much, much more. And of course, with me as always are my co-hosts, Chad Schonk and Ryan Schweck, and we will go ahead and turn it over to Chad.
This is just a reminder that this is a book club, not a review show. We will be talking as if you have either done the reading or don't care if it's spoiled for you. In addition, we may be referencing any number of other Star Wars stories, including the current season of Clone Wars on Disney+, so consider yourself warned. I have spoken. Ryan, do we have any news this week?
Yeah, it's a pretty slow week for news, which, with everything going on plus the time of the year is pretty normal, but there were a few interesting things. One, Hallmark released this year's Christmas ornament selection, which is usually nothing to write home about. Your normal X-Wing, TIE Fighter, there's a Mando, it's fine. But the reason that I bring it up is because this year they have an amazing Darth Vader Admiral Mahdi ornament.
Tell me more.
It is him sitting in his chair and Vader straight up killing him.
Oh,
and
shit.
It's called a lack of faith. It's one of my favorite things ever to put on a Christmas tree.
That's for Christmas.
Yep.
Coming this Christmas, lack of faith.
Yeah.
I was gonna say slow news day, but you redeemed it there at the end. That's pretty cool.
It's amazing. I cannot wait to own this.
What you didn't mention is there any ornaments for the child?
They're not. And they came out with.
What?
Only Mandalorian that they showed was him, and it's not even him in his Beskar. It's in that first uniform. Now, might they come out with more? Because they kind of list this as a sneak peek in their dream book. So there might be more. There's definitely nothing as exciting as last year. The story ornaments. Have you guys seen these?
I didn't. I used to keep up, but I've kind of fallen off. I do have several Star Wars ornaments, but then I got married, and things change.
So they concluded it last year, and I think it's 1, 2, 3. It's about 8 ornaments. It's a Y-wing, an A-wing, the Falcon, a TIE Fighter, the Death Star, and you hook them all together, and when you push a button, it does an abbreviated version of A New Hope. It's amazing. And they light up depending on where they're supposed to be and where they're talking, and it's really cool. But anyway, that was last year. So the lack of faith is really cool. The second thing that came out this week, there was a leak of Rosario Dawson's contract. So it appears that was confirmed. But the interesting part is the contract is not listed for multiple seasons of The Mandalorian. The contract reads for multiple shows. So it kind of...
And you don't mean multiple episodes, you mean multiple series.
It's multiple series.
Yeah.
And so it looks more and more like we're going to get live action Ahsoka, possibly with Sabine. So that's
possibly with her own show, yeah.
Yeah. And then since it's a slow news week, I just wanted to bring up to people, if you are online and you are seeing anything about Star Wars or Marvel or really any of it, and the source is wegotThiscovered.com.
Run away.
Do not listen to it. Do not share it. Do not click like. Don't even comment on it. They are terrible.
Do not have it covered.
They do not. It is the most clickbait spam nonsense. It's so many fan sites link to it. Even official Star Wars ones do, and it's just ridiculous.
But it's worse than Ain't Cool ever was.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. So anyway, that was all we had for this week.
Cool. So our book this week, we're going to talk about E.K. Johnston's novel Ahsoka from 3 years ago, I think. But before we get into that, Ahsoka tells the story, of course, of a Jedi who survived Order 66. And one thing that I was going to ask Beth, when we were growing up, we thought the only Jedi, we were told that the Emperor and Vader got rid of all the Jedi, and we assumed that the only 2 Jedi left were Obi-Wan and Yoda. But through the years, storytellers a lot of them novelists, comic writers, and video games as well, have added more survivors to the story, both in the expanded universe and now in the new canon. What do you think of that trend? Does it add more to the story, or does it kind of take away the specialness of Obi-Wan and Yoda?
I feel like it's a little of both, because with thousands and thousands of Jedi all across the galaxy, it would make more sense that there just be more than 2 Jedi that get away. It would make more sense that there are dozens, if not even 100, that manage to survive. It does take away a little bit from the magic of it just being these 2 guys left. But I don't know. I'm torn on it, because I do feel like in a way it does make sense, but also in a way they're not so special anymore.
No, I think it's a little bit of both too. Ryan, I know you play games and read the comics too, so you've experienced a lot of these characters.
Right.
What's your reaction normally when it's yet, like when Fallen Order came out and it's yet another Jedi that survived the Purge?
I'm okay with it. I think it makes sense because, why wouldn't some of them just throw their lightsaber down, take their hobo robe off, and just be some normal guy? It gives you a little more, story to see them go a little longer. I mean, really, by the time you get to A New Hope, though, I mean, even the ones we've survived, we've seen a lot of them killed already. A
few, yeah.
Yeah, so, we know who do we know? I mean, the only ones confirmed, really, we know are still kicking around is Ahsoka, right?
What about Cal?
Well, I think they haven't confirmed Cal.
Okay.
Wait, I thought Quinlan Voss was still alive somewhere.
Quinlan Voss is, he's assumed alive.
Yeah.
There's Ahsoka. Obviously, Kanan isn't around by the time the movie starts, because that's one thing I was noticing is I'm fascinated by how storytellers explain. Well, they create these Jedi and then they have to explain why they're not present in the later stories and why they weren't part of the rebellion. They had to kill Kanan. They had to make Ezra disappear. For years, people lived in fear of what was going to happen to Ahsoka by the end of Clone Wars. And so it's always interesting to me the hoops they have to go through. And Cal and Seer, right, are still out there, I guess, technically?
Technically, right now they are.
Yeah.
They're going to make a sequel to that game. And
yeah, maybe
we'll see who's around at the end of that one.
The only other question I have about this, because it is something that it tended to bother me a little bit in the expanded universe because it just got a little nuts, but is that if all these Jedi are still out there, if Yoda and Obi-Wan and Kanan and Cal and Quinlan Voss get together, they couldn't take out Palpatine?
They got to get through a lot of stuff to get to Palpatine, though.
It's not like powerful
he's just
group
hanging out.
No, it is, but Luke did it. I mean, it's a pretty powerful. Luke trained for like a week and a half. Like, it just seems. I don't know. It just, that's one thing that always strained it for me, is the more Jedi that they added that survived it, the more it made them feel like cowards.
Yeah. Well, but there's not a organized effort against the Empire really until Rogue One, right around when Rebels was. And so at that point, it would be you versus the whole Empire. And, Obi-Wan told him to go hide. Like,
that's
wait
true.
and regroup.
Even for 6 or 7 Jedi, that's a lot to go against. Luke had an in because that's his dad, so he's got that nepotism thing going for him.
It did get him in the door.
That's how we got away with it. Everybody else would have been fighting a really big uphill battle to get through there.
Yeah. And Ahsoka tried and learned she was not up to the task.
Well, yeah, it's true. Speaking of which, of my favorite Jedi who survived the Order, today we're going to talk about E.K. Johnston's novel, Ahsoka. I have a brief description. It's not too much because, to me, the real good parts of this book don't really have a whole lot to do with the plot. But beginning with her standoff against Maul during the soon-to-be dramatized Siege of Mandalore, and ending with her firmly entrenched as the rebel operative known as Fulcrum. Ahsoka follows the path of Padawan Tano as she grieves the fall of the Jedi and attempts to live a quiet life as Ashla, the mechanic. But her desire to hide from the Empire is topped by her innate sense of good, and Ahsoka finds herself not only helping friends in need across the galaxy, but eventually reuniting with Bail Organa and joining the fledgling rebellion. The book goes back and forth between several different worlds, 2 main worlds. But to start off, I want to start the discussion like this. So Ahsoka, who's no longer a Padawan, tries to find a new life for herself, shows her aptitude as a mechanic, befriends a pair of sisters, and eventually ends up at Peril, where she does the right thing. Am I talking about this novel or her current arc on Clone Wars?
Yeah, it's awful close.
It's real close.
It's very similar, is it not?
It is.
Do you think, now I know that when Johnson wrote this book, she was given some insider information and she was told to stay away from certain things and to hit certain beats. To me, it kind of watching this most recent arc, it feels like some of the things that they gave her, they had intended to use in this season, maybe kind of some of the ideas, you know, I mean, like they're not, the sisters aren't exactly the same. They're not the same as the Martez sisters, but it's still pretty close, right?
So she's just running around the galaxy saving sisters. If you don't have a sister, hell with you.
She's got a type.
She kind of does.
Yeah.
She kind of does have a type.
One thing I thought was interesting, and Johnson said this in interviews and actually said it when I saw her speak last year, was that there originally was a lot more to the Siege of Mandalore chapter, that it was all written out. You were going to see more of it and her, running away into hiding, and Filoni and them came in and said, you cannot do this, because at that point they were already working on Clone Wars and it hadn't been announced, and hadn't told her. And so they said, okay, you can have this ending with Order 66 happening here and Maul getting away kind of in the chaos of it, but that's it.
But that's my biggest problem with the beginning of the book, is I felt like something happened that I missed. I'm like, wait, was there like an entire 5-episode arc of Clone Wars that I just didn't know about?
Yeah, it starts tomorrow.
I know.
Exactly. Yeah.
But at the time I read this book 3 years ago, I did not know that. And I was pissed because I was like, wait, I need to see what happened here. Why isn't anybody showing me how we got here?
Yeah.
It is a problem with the book to start off with something so cool.
Right.
Is Ahsoka staring down Darth Maul on a flaming Mandalore and then cutting away.
Well, and it makes me wonder, like, I was trying to figure out the timing when I was kind of thinking about it now. So if Order 66 happens there, that means that Anakin and Obi-Wan in this season of Clone Wars are going to leave her there.
Yep.
With Maul.
Yeah.
Yep.
And just be like, all right, see ya. Like,
because the book clearly
luck,
the book clearly had the moment where Anakin and Obi-Wan are going off to save the Chancellor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Anakin gives Ahsoka her lightsabers and said, "You got this, kid."
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting scene. I mean, surely they're going to show that on Clone Wars. I wouldn't be surprised if they have, because that's their goodbye moment.
It was so detailed that I can't imagine that wasn't straight from Filoni's notes.
Mm-hmm.
It just felt that way. But it is a little, I agree, Beth, it's a little confusing to open the book that way and then suddenly cut. But I think Johnson is considered a YA writer. Did this book feel that way to you guys?
Not at all.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I didn't either. I think this is technically qualified as young adult, but I thought her writing, I like her writing. I think it's very sharp. It didn't feel, again, YA books can be well written, obviously, but it didn't feel that way, other than the fact that it was dealing with young characters. Right?
I think that's why maybe it got the YA listing, or that she's already a YA author, but it didn't feel young adult.
Yeah, the only way I knew it was young adult is when I read the book. It had the larger print type that YA books have. You can always tell when you're reading a YA, because for some reason they think children can't see.
Well, and I think we talked about this before. I have not read this book. I have just listened to it twice, because the audiobook is written by, and I need to apologize, it's actually Eckstein, not Eckstein. I said Eckstein last week. And she read the audiobook of Ahsoka, and so it's really great to hear Ahsoka reading Ahsoka's story. However, this book has one of the confounding things about this book to me is it has these cutaways to different characters that have nothing to do with the main narrative. That put us in the point of view of characters that aren't in the story and that aren't Ahsoka. And so while it's very effective to have Ahsoka reading the Ahsoka chapters, when it all of a sudden cuts to Obi-Wan's thoughts sitting on Tatooine, it was odd to me that was in this book. Did that strike anybody else as kind of out of place? Even as entertaining as those sections may have been.
Well, so I didn't mind the cutaway to like the Inquisitor, because that's, to me, really, that was kind of interesting stuff. I think one of the strengths of her writing was the way she wrote Ahsoka's thoughts felt like the way you would think Ahsoka would think. It felt really like her. And that was great. But then cutting to, Bail sitting around thinking about things, or the guy who's crunching numbers for the Empire about Raida, I don't care. But I also did not care about a lot of the characters in this book.
I liked them a little bit more, but I agree that, at least the Inquisitor is part of the story. Bail at the end of the book becomes part of the story. But when it cut to Obi-Wan, I was like, there's no real reason for us to be here. And especially from Obi-Wan's point of view, it just felt like a stretch. It felt a little shoved in there just to get the characters into the book when it wasn't really part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Did that strike you, Ryan, at all? Any of that stuff? Because there's a lot of these little cutaways, or a handful at least.
Yeah, I didn't mind them, but I kept waiting for there to be a reason that they were there. Like, somehow it was going to tie in that, Obi-Wan can talk to Qui-Gon now. We're going to see Ahsoka talk to somebody, or, something that would just bring it in, and that didn't really happen.
That's true. I want to talk about some of the. Like I said, the plot of this book is fine. It's Ahsoka basically being Bruce Banner, or I guess more David Banner, from the old Hulk series, just kind of going around and wanting to be quiet and then helping out people and being good. But this, and I'll slide this to Ryan real quick. This book is pretty heavy in new lore stuff, isn't it? It gave us a lot.
Yeah, you get the Inquisitors, you get all the new stuff about the Kyber crystals. At some point she talks about going to Maz's castle. The kind of setup of the rebellion is more like new canon than the old canon was, like the beginnings of it with Bail and all of them. I'm trying to think what else.
That was the stuff. The lightsaber stuff was the most interesting to me because it felt at first it didn't feel like reading this the second time through I'd forgotten that's where this was from, the bleeding of the crystals for the Sith, and that was brand new in this book, and it felt like a pretty heavy lift for a first time Star Wars writer in a YA book, to kind of launch into this really heavy question that's been around forever, which is why are their lightsabers red and the Jedi are not. And this is the first of the new canon to explain it, and I thought that was interesting. It's not something I expected in the middle of this Ahsoka book. But am I wrong? Or is this the first place this has been approached? Right? This was the first time they answered those questions.
Yeah, I think this was the first time, and they showed kind of how you do it. And they threw in some stuff for the old kind of canon, like Ashla. The name that she uses is the old term for the light side of the Force, in really old Star Wars, which I thought was a really cool little detail.
It's also the name of the Togruta girl, Padawan in episode 2. The little girl that's training with Yoda, that's of the same race as Ahsoka. Her name was also Ashla. So it would actually kind of make sense that Ashla would name herself after that. That Ahsoka would take the name of this deceased little girl from her home planet. So let's see. I thought the lightsaber stuff was cool. Everyone who watches Rebels knows that Ahsoka ended up with shows back up into the story with white lightsabers, something we haven't really seen before. Did you like the depiction of that, Beth? Like how she got her white lightsabers? Was it Did it work for you?
It absolutely did, because I always wondered how she got those awesome, badass white lightsabers
They're pretty
when
rad.
she showed up in Rebels, and it's just like, those are awesome. Why doesn't anybody else have those? And now it completely makes sense. Now, I do have a lightsaber question.
Sure.
To canon, if either of you can answer this. I received a few years ago a build your own lightsaber wall hanging kind of a lamp deal. And in the description on the back of the box, what I thought was interesting, because this thing changes colors, it said that red kyber crystals or red crystals for lightsabers were often synthetic. Now, is that a real thing? Because I've only ever seen it on this toy.
That's
Yeah.
But that's on a fairly recently released toy. Or,
I think that's what was assumed. I think that was the fact until this book came out.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's relatively new. I mean, the red crystals, you have to bleed them. You've got to put them in your hand and concentrate all your hate in them.
As shown in Ryan's favorite comic, The Rise of Kylo Ren.
That he does do it at the end.
And that makes sense to me. I'm fine with that. It makes much more sense to me than them being able to manufacture fake crystals, because otherwise, wouldn't other people be trying to do that?
And there was stuff in old canon about the synthetic crystals, and they never, they would malfunction, and I'm trying to remember. There was one where, they made it and you could slice through the lightsaber eventually because the crystal was not real. But yeah, new canon, you got to have kyber.
But I did like that the way she went looking for her crystals, and the description of what they were doing to Ilum was kind of even upsetting to me. I was like, oh, how dare they? And I didn't expect to have an emotional reaction to Ilum being destroyed or torn apart. Not destroyed, but kind of it's being destroyed. I liked how she got the crystals. I liked how she got there, and the story, the path it took to get us there.
All these books have made me want to see a scene now in the Death Star that's got the focusing array. Because, I mean, they destroyed Ullum for it. They destroyed Jeddah for all these crystals for the Death Star. That's got to be a giant room of crystal that I think would be really cool to see.
See, what these new books have made me wanted is a story about the Star Wars version of Greenpeace. Because they very clearly, especially in this new version, made it out that the Empire are very resource-hungry non-environmentalists. And that everywhere they go, they mine planets to death. And it's been very clear the agenda there. But just some kind of Greenpeace activists, they sit out in an X-wing, and I don't know. But I liked. So Beth, you said you weren't. What did you mean earlier when you said you didn't love the characters? Did you not like the system? Were you not as into the story on what were the planets called?
Raida and Thebesca.
And Thebesca, which sounds a lot like Themyscira. But I did notice that the book kind of just went kind of ping-ponged back and forth between those locations.
I found her friends on Raida kind of bland. They were just and here's the guy who's going to be a jerk and get everybody in trouble, and then here's this other guy who's the one who kind of looks after everybody, and here's the sister who's wily and knows how to do things, and then here's sister who has a crush on her. But the family,
but that was cute.
It was cute, but it was still kind of I don't care. You're not going to get any action out of a Jedi unless you're going after Rael Aberos.
And that's probably part of your YA part. Your side characters are more just kind of archetypes, and you got to understand them real fast.
I was really, really more interested in the family that she was with on Thebesca that had that potential little Jedi hanging out with them. And the fact that she freaked out when she realized, oops, I left this little kid behind. And then the Inquisitor coming after them and kind of eyeballing the family, and then her coming back to try to make it right. I was way more interested in that because I feel like the book touches on it, but I want to know more about what does happen to all of the Force-sensitive children or potential Jedi, because the Empire can't find all of them. The Empire didn't take every single one of them. Otherwise, there'd be 10,000 Inquisitors out there.
They've talked about, and I can't remember where it's at, but that when they sense it or they, there's reports or whatever, or Vader feels it, he just goes and murders them.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of what he keeps himself busy doing for 19 years.
Yeah,
is murdering them. But yeah, I like the Fardies. Yeah, I think the family. I like them a lot. I thought the fact that Ahsoka kind of took a job for them as a smuggler, but a smuggler for good, kind of running supplies to people and everything was interesting. I liked Caden and Miara. I agree with you, but there was something to me endearing about Ahsoka just kind of sitting at a bar with a bunch of other teenagers. It kind of reflects what she's going through in Clone Wars now, where she doesn't really know how to interact with people her age, having grown up in the temple. And this was more, I liked how she was doing her best, but I also like just kind of how awkward the idea of Ahsoka, who's been, at the head of armies and has seen the entire galaxy and has killed and has almost died a million times, and all of a sudden she's just sitting around with these kids that are complaining that their threshers aren't working. I found that kind of endearing, and I enjoyed that part of it. I agree that the characters were a little cookie cutter, and I didn't care a whole lot when they got killed. Real quick, has Ahsoka shown before that she was handy before this, or is this a result of her spending too much time with Sky Guy?
Well, remember, her big brother taught her, as we learned in Clone Wars.
Yeah, okay, all right. So
I'm trying to remember. I know on Clone Wars we've seen her help fix stuff.
Right.
I can't remember anything specific, but I know I feel like that was not a surprise to me.
Oh, no, it made sense. I couldn't remember, because it's been a while since I've watched like all of Clone Wars. Mm-hmm. I just couldn't remember if that was something they'd worked in, where she was like good with mechanics, like Anakin was.
For some reason, I have a visual in my head. I could not tell you what episode it is or which ones, of her like wearing goggles and welding, and them like showing her doing stuff.
One thing that I really appreciated, that I think Beth got to a little bit, was how much this puts us in the mind of a Jedi or an ex-Jedi living with the guilt of surviving Order 66. The other bit of knowledge we got from this book was that Ahsoka and Rex faked their own deaths.
Yep.
In order to not be chased anymore, which I thought was interesting. That I believe in the official record they killed each other. But the idea that we got much more, we always, again, like I said earlier, people were sitting through Clone Wars going, is Ahsoka going to get killed by Anakin? Is she going to die before the series is over because she's not in episode 3? What's going to happen? We found out what happened. But the idea that she's living with this, that she knows what happened, that she escaped it. I thought that was really interesting. She had a passage where she was thinking about the younglings, and she mentioned them being killed by a face they trusted. And while she means the clones, she's wrong and right at the same time. And I thought that was a kind of a powerful idea, that she's just thinking about these kids not knowing who that face that they trusted really was. But how put this? Did you like that depiction of again? We've talked about these Jedi before, but this is the first one to me, the first experience I got where I really felt like someone was kind of living through the trauma of what happened.
Yeah, I think, you see the survivor's guilt and almost a PTSD. And at the same time, she talks about, like, the Force, while she can still, push and pull things, she feels really cut off. That she can't feel anybody anymore, and that she used to, I can't remember how they say it, but she used to be able to reach out and feel all the Jedi and all the Force users, and now it's gone and she feels empty. Which, could lead back to why the other ones don't do anything either, where you don't feel anybody out there.
Because they're all hiding in the Force, I think, right? It's not just they can't feel them. It's just that the Force is shattered. It's hurting. And everyone's kind of lost their connection a little bit to it. Mm-hmm. And it's even the Force itself has kind of almost gone over to the dark side in a way. Mm-hmm. And and also if you're hiding, if you're as powerful a being as Yoda, you would have to do a little bit to kind of shut yourself off so that Palpatine couldn't feel you out there. I mean, according to the books, Palpatine can feel a tiny disturbance in the Force in the unknown regions.
Right.
You think he would notice when Yoda was going to use the bathroom or something?
I know they haven't talked about it in new canon, but I know in old canon that's one of the reasons he's on Dagobah, is that Dagobah kind of masks him.
Well, that's because of the dark side cave.
Right. But yeah, I mean, I think that idea that they all kind of shut themselves off. I mean, you see, Cal does it in Fallen Jedi. Kanan essentially does it.
Yeah. I mean, Luke does it, obviously in the sequels. And that's also something even in, I believe, Ulick Qel-Droma did it back in the Tales of the Jedi books. After he came back from the dark, he ended up losing his connection to the Force. That was his penance for his trip to the dark side. But I found that depiction of her living with it really interesting, and it was heartbreaking, just like on the show when she says that line about her older brother teaching her how to fix things. You get this real sense of loss. But I also felt a little sad because Obi-Wan is still out there, and did Obi-Wan never think to reach out to her?
Well, Bail knows where he's at.
Yeah.
Why did he not tell her? Like, hey,
that
guess
part
what?
made me so mad.
Well, we'll get to the Bail stuff. There's all sorts of questionable things going on in that section.
Well, go ahead. What did you find problematic about the Bail stuff? I mean, the book does find Ahsoka basically joining Bail's rebellion because he follows some reports of Jedi activity. Yep. And finds her, and then sends some guys to kind of kidnap her. Kinda. I don't know. I don't know how to explain that, but he sends a couple pilots to find her, and she ends up stunning them or something.
She tricks them. She hides her ship, and R2 hides her on the little thing, and he sees her little head taily.
So, Mr. Rebellion, what was the problem with the Bail stuff?
All right, so here's the damn problem.
Okay, sure.
There's a lot of problems. The new canon is having a big issue with figuring out how and when the rebellion really starts. And it changes from book to book. In this book, you see Bail send A-Wings to the planet to attack and to save the people.
I wasn't happy about the A-Wings.
So, if you read Leia, which takes place later, this book takes place, Leia's about 5.
Yeah, this takes place from like 18 BBY, because a bulk of it takes place about a year after.
Yeah.
And then the rest of it covers, it seems like a few years.
Yep. And then Leia takes place a few years after that, the Leia book.
Yeah.
Leia book
probably 10 years after, yeah.
Goes a lot into that they are not ready to fight back. They are not military, against the Empire. That was supposed to be the whole big deal in Rogue One and in Rebels, and that was supposed to be Hera's deal. You see it in A New Dawn. Isn't that what it is? Whatever that book's called. That she's the one that's kind of like, all right, we're going to start fighting. And that's why they're supposed to not like the Partitions and all that kind of mess. But here you see Bail already openly rebelling, which doesn't line up to anything else.
I was a little thrown off by that too. It felt too early for him to be at the stage where he had fighters, where he literally had A-Wing fighters.
I think that was my problem too, was that the ending felt very rushed to me. Like we've spent all this time with Ahsoka as a character, building. Oh, all of a sudden, hey, I'm ready to join your rebellion now. Let's go.
Well, and it means you have Fulcrum. I mean, that's the end. You can call me Fulcrum now. That means Fulcrum was operating for 10 years out there. It just doesn't line up.
Yeah, that bugged me because there's absolutely no time that passes in between her hooking up with Bail and her becoming Fulcrum. That doesn't make a bit of sense to me.
I saw an interview with Johnson, which I recommend checking out interviews with her. She was just adorable and giddy about getting a chance to write Ahsoka. It's really, really fun to see how much of a Star Wars fan she is. The interviewer and the one I saw asked her to recommend some of her other books, and she recommended Lost Stars and Kenobi. because she just loved him so much. And the guy was like, no, your books. And she's like, oh, well, okay. But she was like, Lost Ark is the best Star Wars novel ever. And she's like, I was talking about you. But she said that when she was given the assignment, she was given a starting point and an ending point. So it was part of her dictate to get to that point of Fulcrum. So it is possible that she kind of told the story she wanted to and then had to just kind of cap it off to get to where it was going.
Yeah.
Because to me, if you're going to cover all that time, I felt like this could have been 3 books. I felt like there could have been more than one book here to get us to because and I think there should be, because as much as this book gives us, and it covers a decent amount of time. I mean, I want to see more.
Yeah, that was one of my problems with the abruptness of it. Was there's so much stuff that could happen in between her meeting up with Bail again and then her coming into Rebels. There's at least 2 books in there of what she could be doing.
Yeah, I'd like to see more of that. Yeah.
And I bet there probably will be. I mean, I'm sure they're holding off while Clone Wars finishes, and then, well, I guess after the other shows occur after, so it wouldn't really matter. But I could see doing a sequel.
And Johnson's, she's currently doing a series about Padme.
Right.
Which we'll maybe talk about, and I enjoyed the first volume of it. But I agree, and I think one of the things that frustrated me by the end as well is that I thought she did, like Beth said earlier, captured Ahsoka's voice perfectly. Mm-hmm. Now, part of that is I'm hearing the actress read it in the audiobook, so that helps. But it feels like it did feel like all of a sudden it had to get the plot over with at the end all of a sudden. That like we were getting this cool character thing, we were getting all this new info about what was going on with the galaxy. I mean, I remember reading it the first time thinking, because at the end of what's it called, The Wrong Jedi, or what's the last episode, Padawan Lost, right? Where she leaves. I didn't think her and Anakin would ever see each other again until this book came out. And then I was like, and like Beth said, what was frustrating about the beginning was I was like, but that's important. I didn't know they were ever going to talk again. And you're only giving me like a little blip of it. And but I will say I enjoyed this book more than I did the last 2 Thrawn books, even though it feels almost just as much of a tie-in, if not more. I thought this book took on more of a life of its own than definitely, I think, than Treason did.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
And felt it managed to find more personal with those other characters. I think it is important to point out, we kind of joked about it, I think it is important to point out the character of Caden. I don't know timeline-wise when this was, but this is a depiction of a non-straight character in a Star Wars book, and an ostensibly YA Star Wars book. So I think that's something worth noting. That Ahsoka's rejection of her was more about, like you said earlier, about being a Jedi than it was about anything else. But I thought, that was something, I think I remember that was like a selling point, or not a selling point, but that was like a news story before it even came out or something like that Ahsoka was going to get a little girlfriend or something. I don't know if you knew this, but Miara turns out to be, her little sister ends up becoming a pretty badass fighter pilot in the Rebellion. As documented in, I think it's in, what's that book? From a Certain Point of View?
Oh, I haven't read that one yet.
E.K. Johnson and Ashley Eckstein wrote a story together that's about Miara as a rebel pilot and like an intelligence officer for Alderaan or something. So, little tidbit about the characters in it. So, where are we at? I wanted to talk about this book because I really like the character, as I said before, and I thought it was, I don't know, I think it's a good book for people that are both big fans of Clone Wars, because it does answer some questions about Clone Wars. It's going to be especially relevant over the next few weeks as we see the Siege of Mandalore, that we're all excited to see what actually happens. But I do say, if you read this book, you probably have a little bit of an idea, right? Like, yeah, what do you think how do you think it's going to end now? What do you think this book tells us about the end of Clone Wars? Like, what's going to happen in that siege?
Well, presumably, Order 66 is issued during the siege.
After she's caught Maul, right?
Right.
Well, and that's going to be weird to see because, again, did Anakin just leave him there? Because there's a good 3 days about, right, between Revenge of the Sith. It takes place over 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
So he's got to be gone for at least 4 days.
Right.
So I'm trying to figure out that timeline. Like, maybe
we've talked about this, Ryan. Stop thinking about time in Star Wars.
I know.
It's not going to make sense, man. It's not going to make sense.
Yeah. One thing I did think of that I'd kind of like to see, just to kind of cement that Ahsoka sees how messed up the Jedi are, is if Anakin and Obi-Wan ditch people dying on Mandalore to go save the Chancellor.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And kind of do like the Republic's bidding.
Right, that they're no longer there to fight for good. They're there to fight for their team. Right. Because one thing that occurred to me about the white lightsaber thing was that Ahsoka kind of at this stage or at this point in our big story is kind of the most pure Jedi of the bunch. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that her lightsaber is kind of the way that's the natural state of the crystals is white. That's what they say, right? Is that like when she we don't think we said this, she gets the Six Brothers, she blows up the Six Brothers lightsaber and takes his crystals. I do have a question. If she can do that, why don't Jedi do that in every fight?
I think it was really tough for her, though.
I'm just saying, why don't they? Yeah, but she's, when you're more powerful, why don't you just sabotage everybody's lightsaber? I mean, it was impressive she managed to beat him without one.
Yeah.
But she takes his crystals, and instead of turning them red or blue, which would be the gang colors of her old team, they go pure white, the way they're in their natural state, the way they're supposed to be. And I thought that was interesting. That says she's no longer Jedi, but she's out there using the Force to help people and doing good for the sake of good and not for her team. I thought that was kind of an interesting way. Should Rey's lightsaber have been white at the end of Rise of Skywalker instead of yellow?
I kind of took it as a purity of the Force as well.
Yeah, that she's kind of she hasn't lost the path the Jedi have.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that makes her character kind of enduring and one we're hoping, or sounds like we're going to see in live action. And since that came up, I guess we've talked about it a little bit, but are you excited for a live action version of this character?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard, because it's going to go two ways. It's either going to be amazing or it's going to be god-awful disappointing.
Yeah.
I don't think there's going to be a middle ground with it. I kind of don't want them to do it. We've talked about before. I think I'd rather them keep her in animation. But we'll see.
I actually 100% agree with Schweck on this one. I think it's cool and it could be awesome, but it also has the potential to be horrible.
I think my desire for more Ahsoka stories outweighs my fear of it being live action. I just want more of the character. I want to know more about her story. I want to know more of the story in general. And if I have to get that live action, we knew this was going to happen eventually.
Yeah.
That they were going to start doing this, and we were eventually going to get some animated characters, the more popular ones, comic characters, are eventually going to feed into live action, especially with that story group and the way they've been doing a pretty good job. Maybe the history of the Alliance being an exception, but doing a pretty good job of keeping this kind of synergistic storytelling happening.
Well, and I think
it's Filoni. As long as Filoni stays in control.
I think the saving grace could be that it is also a very, very different Ahsoka, because timeline-wise, she's going to be a completely different person. She's a middle-aged woman at this point, or I don't know how to grid an age, but, she's older. So
yes,
it's not the same kid older, that we know.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, she's going to be, it depends on, I don't know, time.
I'm trying to calculate how old she would be.
I mean, remember things go slower in different places.
At least in her 30s.
No, older than that. She'll be in her 40s at least.
Was she? I mean, she's. It's going to be what? This is what, 5 years after Return of the Jedi?
Yeah. So.
Is Mandalorian?
Roughly 18 BBY.
So that's about 9 years after we last saw her.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's 5. No, the last time we saw her was, I guess, technically the end of Rebels. So it'd be 5 years after that. Although I guess we don't know exactly what date her and Sabine go looking for Ezra, right? We just know it's after.
Right. All we know is it's between Force Awakens and Return of the Jedi. And
could see it probably before the Mandalorian and probably before the Purge of Mandalore, if we had to guess, right? Would make sense.
I would assume so.
Because if she was there when the Purge went down, I think it would have gone down a little differently.
Right.
Okay, cool. I think that's enough. I guess we should get to, did we like this book, and would we recommend it to someone who's especially interested in this period of Star Wars or these characters? Ryan?
Absolutely. It's a great book. I really enjoyed it. I'd recommend it to anybody. You don't have to have a lot of canon knowledge to enjoy it. We did miss, however, the most important piece of canon that was added to this book.
Oh, no.
And that is who found Ahsoka to bring her to the Jedi Temple.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, yeah.
It's the greatest Jedi there is, Plo Koon.
We didn't know that from Clone Wars?
Plo Koon. I don't know if they've ever said it.
No, I thought she said it.
Did she?
Might have. I don't know.
I thought she said something about it, like why she cared so much about him was because he was the one who found her, but...
I did like that detail on that part, too, that apparently there's people running around faking being Jedi, like kidnapping kids.
Yeah, that was pretty dark. That was real dark.
Yeah, like at first I was like, man, that's rough. And then I thought about it for a while. I was like, that is a great idea.
That's a good scam.
Good way to get some kids.
I mean, if you're looking to get a bunch of kids...
Yeah, I'm getting me some Jedi kid and going to Canto Bight, and it's party time.
And while you mentioned that real fast, there was a point where Ahsoka mentioned the little girl. I wrote her name down, but I don't see it. It was like 9 syllables, whatever. But the little girl who was force sensitive, Ahsoka mentioned that a lot of younglings tend to show affinity at an early age for like one thing, and that's how they're discovered.
Oh, yeah, I did think that was interesting.
And I thought that was really interesting because, Anakin, obviously, it was his, like, reflexes. And with Ahsoka, it said it was her empathy, is what it said. That Ahsoka's empathy, her kind of supernatural empathy is what attracted people, what made her stand out as a Force sensitive. And I thought that was really interesting. And I think it goes to a conversation we had, Ryan, over The Mandalorian about the child's powers and whether they're just innate.
Right.
He just knows how to do it, and maybe because he's a Yoda, he's got multiple innate abilities. But I thought that was a little detailed that it was her empathy that made her stand out, and I think that's kind of stood up over time as the characters developed. So next week, Ryan, what are we going to read for next week?
Next week we are going to get into, oh my gosh, I forgot the exact. I always want to call this one Rebel Rising, but it is not.
No, I read that one too. That one too.
It is Rise of the Resistance. Rise of the Resistance is the Avengers Endgame of new canon, in which we bring in everybody from all the books together and figure out exactly how we went from the end of Last Jedi to Rise of Skywalker.
If you want to keep up with that conversation, you're going to have to read everything.
Yeah.
And then come listen, because it's going to be a ride. And then after we do Rise of the Resistance, I think we're going to take a little trip back to the old expanded universe and look at some books from then that we think could maybe fit into this current canon. And that even if they're not officially part of the story anymore, are still really damn good books. So I think that's going to be our next step after that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. That's enough for now, right? We'll see you next episode.
All right. Great. Everybody stay home. Stay safe.
Stay home. Stay safe. Bye.
You have been listening to a Needless Things podcast. You can follow Needless Things on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and at needlessthingspodcast.com. Love you. Mean it. Uh-huh.